In episode 7, Joe continues to play a good suburban husband, even going to game nights and dinner parties with the Conrads, but the whole time he's thinking about one person, and it's not his wife. It's Marion. He's been texting her. She hasn't been responding, though. Love also has her other person on mind. She goes upstairs to put some laundry away when she looks outside and sees Theo is just chilling with a beer. So she decides to put her act in plan. She starts undressing and then fakes like she notices him and texts him, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there." And he responds with, "Don't need to apologize." She tells him, though, "I need to talk to you about something, so meet me at the bakery tomorrow." When he agrees, she puts the phone down, and there's Joe just in the doorway. And Love tells him he agreed, he'll meet me tomorrow. But Joe knows what she's doing, and he knows that he has to act a tiny bit jealous just to keep putting it on, like Love is still number one on his depth chart. He then tells her that there's a library fundraiser coming up and Marion asks him to stay late. He plays it off like he wants to say no, but it's just going to piss her off, so he gave in. Love asks if the fundraiser is something she should attend, but that is the last thing Joe wants. Both women in the same room together? Nah, no thanks. The next day, he heads into work on a Monday, and all he's thinking about is Marion, who is getting ready for that fundraiser. The theme is Alice in Wonderland. Marion starts complaining about Sherry Conrad because this fundraiser is her doing, but out of nowhere, Joe just says, "I couldn't stop thinking about you." And Marion pulls him to a more private area of the library and says, "Yeah, Joe, I was thinking about you too all weekend, but we can't do this. You're married." And Joe tells her it's not that simple. I promise you that. He knows, though, deep down that he can't push too hard, because if he does, he's going to end up losing her. But the conversation gets broken up by a little girl, and it turns out that this little girl is Juliet, Marion's daughter. Ryan was, quote, nice enough to drop her off so she could have some time with her. Marion introduces Juliet to Joe, but Juliet is very suspect of him. Dante ends up coming over because he's got Juliet's glasses with him, and they're broken. Marion knows she has to get the glasses fixed before Ryan sees it, but there's one problem. Her car's in the shop, so Joe volunteers to take them. Even though that's the last thing Juliet wants, Marion says, okay. As the trio walk to get Juliet's glasses fixed, Joe tells her, "I just have to say, it's been a long time since I've been this happy. So I just want to say thank you." Marion then gets a text message from Ryan. He tells her that his news channel is making a sizable donation to the library and he has to be there to hand out the big check. She thinks this is another ploy by Ryan to control her, show that he can even get to her when she's at work. This is nothing more than a power move because he's furious she's reopening custody. She also warns Joe that after he stood up to him, he's never going to forget it. And that's one of the reasons why the relationship between Marion and Joe cannot happen. So Joe does what Joe does. He needs to get more information on Ryan. He ends up attending an NA meeting and listening to Ryan's spiel about getting clean. He then follows Ryan and looks at his routine of waking up pretty late, slamming a bunch of protein shakes, working out with his buddy, and being a pretty uninvolved father. But Joe has noticed that he's switched one addiction, drugs, to another, working out. And he probably just needs a little bit of a push to get off the wagon. He texts Carrie, "Do you know where I can get some Adderall? Love is making me clean the garage and I need help." And Carrie gives him a number of a guy. So Joe gets the drugs with plans of trying to get Ryan back into a downward spiral. But as Joe was tailing Ryan, Love was freaking out a little bit because her mother was supposed to watch Henry that day, but she hadn't shown up. And that was the day of her divorce proceedings. Love figures that her mom is probably still mad at her from the big fight at the vineyard because the proceedings were supposed to be done hours ago. But she does actually need to get to work. As she's trying to figure out what to do, Sherry stops over. She tells her that her caterer has flaked out for this event, and she thought, well, I know a caterer, Love. She begs Love to be her caterer, saying it would be great for the bakery and the business, and Love eventually agrees. But then Sherry notices that there's a glow about Love, and she figures that it's her sex life being back on track, but there's silence. Love chalks it up to Joe just being really busy at work. And Sherry tells her, "I'm not judging you. There's a study out there that says that our sex parts get really bored with each other. I'm going to forward you a blog post I wrote to get your sex life back on track and make your man feel like he's in charge while spicing things up." Love, though, does need to get to work because she has that big meeting, we'll call it, with Theo. Theo thinking that it's a meeting, but of the sex kind. And Love says, no, I didn't call you here for that. Which really confuses Theo because She's kind of sending mixed signals. She apologizes for that, chalking it up to her being a mess with her parents' divorce and all. Theo is more than willing to help out because they're, quote, friends after all. And Love says, well, if you really want to help out, can you find out what your dad has on me and Joe? And that's really confusing to Theo of why she would even want that. He tells her, unless it's a legit crime, he's not going to care about anything you guys do. And of course, Theo has no idea they actually killed Natalie. Love, though, tells him that it's just kind of PTSD from growing up in the spotlight with her family situation going on. She's just very protective and wants to know what exactly kind of information he has. So Theo agrees. He'll do his best to try to get her all the information that Matthew has compiled on Love and Joe. Love then heads home to start working on Sherry's fundraiser when all of a sudden, Dottie walks through the door. She is clearly drunk, and it's for good reason because the divorce proceedings did not go her way. Not only did Love's dad take Anavarin, but he also found a loophole to take the vineyard that she just bought. And that was supposed to be her second act, so she's not exactly handling it well. She's more mad at herself, blaming herself for marrying the, quote, wrong man. Dottie tells her, you need to know what to look out for in your own marriage, but Love says, my marriage is nothing like yours. And Dottie asks her, so you're not sleeping with the neighbor? But Love gets super uncomfortable and just says, I'm not discussing this with you. Dottie starts pouring herself some more wine, and Love tells her it's enough, and Dottie gets really mad and leaves. But next door, Theo is trying to find out as much information as he can. It's hard to do, though, because Matthew doesn't leave his office. He's even called in a former colleague who had some high-tech facial recognition software. He wants to buy it off her because he's been able to hack into every single surveillance camera in Madre Linda. And he wants to follow people because it's just a ton of footage. He's not going to have the time to find that. The woman, though, doesn't really want to do it because the FBI had already kind of given her a hard time about this, but Matthew offers her too much money to pass it up, so she starts hooking up the system. Theo's hunt for information is simply going to have to wait. The next day, Joe spends most of his day breaking into Ryan's place as he's working out and trying to set up the steps to get him off of his routine. Spiking his protein stuff with Adderall, thinking that could be the gateway drug, taking the batteries out of his alarm clock so he wakes up late. But when he starts looking through some books, he sees some pretty provocative pictures of Marion. And he wants to take them so badly, but he doesn't. He just jerks off to him instead, and then he leaves with the plans of coming back the next day and seeing his plan fully go into effect. When he gets home, though, Love looks unbelievable. I mean, not only is she a dime, but she's cooking her ass off. She informs Joe that she is now going to be the caterer at the fundraiser, and the first thing Joe thinks of is, oh, great, Love and Marion in the same room. Just what I tried to avoid. Joe, however, plays it off like he's thrilled. But that's when Love gets really up on Joe because she had read Sherry's blog that she sent over and she decided to put some of the tactics into use. And I guess in that blog it says, as soon as your husband gets home, give him a blowjob. But Joe had no idea that this was even on the table and he's got nothing left in the tank, if you know what I mean. So he has to tell Love, yeah, maybe another time. And of course, Love doesn't take that the right way because what guy is going to pass up that kind of welcome home greeting? The next day, it's not going any better for Love. She's completely stressed out. And Theo comes over to tell her, I can't find out what my dad has on you or Joe yet, but I will. He then tells her, it's pretty tough to have a conversation with you and ignore the fact that I am completely distracted by how much I want you. Love, though, doesn't say anything. She actually starts crying. And Theo goes over to comfort her and she says, I don't know what's wrong with me. And that's when Love and Theo get it on for round 2. And they had the place all to themselves because Joe had headed out that morning to see how things were going with Ryan. And everything was going according to plan. When Ryan came out to his car, there was a flat tire. And when he called over his buddy handed him a joint and Ryan started smoking it. So Joe thinks in a couple hours, this guy's going to be so high, he's not going to know where he is. Now, while that's going great, Joe also knows he needs to make amends with Love for what happened the previous night. So he goes out and he buys her this kitchen item that's extremely tough to find, and he fills it with a bunch of pastries that she loves from LA. Love loves it. But then she starts crying, saying, I really thought you didn't find me attractive anymore. And that's when Joe realizes he's been completely single-minded, that he's neglected Love this whole time. He realizes that night at the fundraiser, he needs to be focused on Love, because if Love isn't happy, then he's never going to be able to have anything with Marion. As Love is getting ready, though, she gets a FaceTime from Dottie, who's planning on coming over and babysitting Henry, but Love says, no, it's okay, we got a babysitter. And Dottie takes it the wrong way, thinking that Love is trying to rip Henry away from her. But Love is justified because Dottie is totally wasted. So she just begs her mom, please don't drive, but I can't talk to you like this, and hangs up. Her and Joe then get ready and they head off to the library. As soon as they arrive, though, Joe starts thinking about how he's going to be able to keep Love and Marion away from each other. That, however, is ruined really quickly when Sherry comes over and brings both of the women together. And Love and Marion have a great conversation. It's one of those, oh, I've heard so much about you. No, I've heard so much about you. Marion, though, doesn't want to put Love onto the scent that there might be something between her and Joe. So she tells Love that she's seeing somebody and Joe's been really great with working late and taking a lot of tasks off her plate. The conversation, though, then gets interrupted when Ryan walks in with a big check. And this completely takes Joe by surprise. He was not expecting this. But Dante comes over and fills him in on why that is. It's because Ryan spikes his protein shakes with drugs. He's constantly high. The reason why Joe couldn't throw him off his routine is because he's built up such a tolerance. Dante knows this because he took a sip of one time, and he was completely tweaked for the rest of the day. Ryan, though, then walks over and interrupts Dante and Joe's conversation. And really, he came over just to talk to Joe. He starts asking Joe some questions, but Joe is giving him very quick one-word answers. And finally, Ryan cuts the chase and says, you know, it's interesting. I've seen you at meetings, hiding in the back, and you don't look like much of an addict. Ryan then gives Joe a really weird test where he tries to feed him some food, and Joe slaps the food away from him. Ryan tells him, I don't know what you're up to, but I bet my life that it's about Marion. Stay away from her. The party then kicks off, and Joe tries to have a good time, but upstairs, Sherry and Love are trying to organize this thing. There's one thing, though, that's been really bothering Sherry, so she comes out and asks, I can't take it anymore. Do you and Joe want to play with me and Carrie? Love, however, doesn't know what she's talking about, and Sherry asks, did you read the blog I sent you? And Love starts saying, yeah, Sherry, I don't really know if that was completely me. I don't know if I'm like a hot wife, which, Love, you are. But it becomes clear to Sherry that Love didn't read the whole blog, because the whole blog is about being in an open relationship, which is what Sherry and Carrie are in. And they want to invite Joe and Love into their house to take their relationship to the next level. Love can't even process this because she gets a Venmo request from her babysitter, and it's way too early for that. And that's because Dottie came over and grabbed Henry early. So now Love is very concerned, calling Dottie nonstop, trying to get Henry back. And Dottie is in a really bad state. She's grabbing tacos with Henry, but she doesn't have him in a car seat, telling the girl behind the counter that this baby is actually her dead son reincarnated. Dottie finishes her night off by setting that vineyard ablaze and then getting arrested. Luckily for Dottie, though, she has really good lawyers who convince the judge not to press charges and just to send her to rehab. But this whole stealing the grandson thing doesn't sit well with Love or Joe. Joe screams at her, what the hell are you doing? But Love interjects and says, take Henry to bed, I'll deal with this. She tells Dottie, tomorrow Joe is going to drive you to rehab, and then you are never going to see me or Henry again. Dottie begs for forgiveness, but it's too late. She could have killed Henry. The next day, Joe does just that. But right before they head off to rehab, Dottie tells Joe a story about Love's first marriage. When Love's first husband went into remission, he asked for a divorce. Next thing you know, he was dead. She has no proof, but she has a mother's intuition that Love might have had something to do with it. She's telling him this because she knows that Love has no loyalty for anybody but herself, and if anything ever happened to Joe, she would feel guilty. So now Joe has that to think about. He drops Dottie off at rehab and then heads into work. And Marion is having a really bad day because Juliet told Ryan that the two had spent the day together. And now she figures that Ryan will use it against her in the courts. She knows that Ryan's going to make this look as bad as he can. And Joe says, we can fix this. But Marion says, you're married. And as far as I can tell, your relationship isn't strained at all. She then breaks things off with Joe. After basically getting dumped by Marion, Joe heads to a fresh tart. And as they're cleaning up and closing for the day, Love comes over and shows Joe Sherry's article about opening up the relationship. Love does that thing where you pretend you're joking, but you're not really. You're just trying to read the room. And Joe actually thinks it's a great idea because this would give him the freedom to have a relationship with Marion. He can't believe this loophole just fell into his lap. They don't agree to opening up their relationship, but it's pretty obvious they're on the steps to that. They step out of a fresh tart, and they are completely unaware that they are being watched by Matthew, who typed in Love Quinn and is watching her every move. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.